having arrived. I'll call the Capital Improvements and Street Maintenance Committee for the City of Wausau to order. Today is Thursday, October 14th, 2021, and a quorum is present. The first item on our agenda today is presentation and discussion of the Director's Report, and I will turn it over to Eric to run over the details of that.
Yeah, so I had a conversation with the city attorney, and before this was just kind of put on the agenda as a director's report and then put on file, but because it's prompted discussion in the past, she felt it would be better if we more or less agendized it versus just having an item on. So it's in a little bit different format, and I kind of broke it out into sections, but if any.
No, I agree. That does give us the opportunity to actually talk about the report without running afoul of open meetings. As long as we confine our discussion to the stuff on here, I think we're okay. Lou?
I want to ask a question of something that's not on there, and that is, I've been talking about for the last couple months, is the Thomas Street from Prospect to Grand, where the road is sinking there. Has there been any updates on that? Have you got it scoped, like you said you were going to, or?
Yeah, I don't know if the televising has been done yet, Lou, for that storm sewer, but our staff is definitely working on it.
Because I'm just wondering what we're waiting on, if somebody to fall through there for us to get sued or what. You know, this has been going on for a couple months now, so I wonder why this has not been prioritized.
Okay. I can get an update for you, and I'll send you an email.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. Then let's kind of cruise through the report. Let's start with the environmental stuff.
So as you know, we have ongoing environmental locations, Riverside Park, 1300 Cleveland, and the mall site. If anybody has any specific questions, I'll be happy to answer what I can.
It looks like they're all still in progress, but no final reports on any of the three, right? Is that kind of?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have questions on the environmental at all? Contained in the report? Looks like there isn't a lot to report yet, so. Okay, and then we'll move on to the construction stuff.
Yep. So Washington Street improvements, we're expecting those to be done the end of next week with that additional parking. 3rd Avenue, the asphalt should be going down this week.
It's down, hallelujah.
Okay, perfect. Concrete repair project, they came in and they're moving through.
It's done now.
It's done.
Yep,
They
I
are
picked
done.
up everything today.
Thanks, Alan. 12th Avenue sidewalk project, is that still scheduled to begin this week?
Yeah, they started the excavating. They'll be pouring concrete next week.
Great. And then McIntosh is ongoing with concrete going down this week, so.
Okay, does anyone have questions about any of those projects? Okay, so we'll continue then to general operations.
Leaf pickup is underway. First phase of it where we have the vac trucks out. Might be a little bit behind. I think we're up on the northeast side right now. On the east side and on the west side, I'm not quite sure where.
They were on Northwest yesterday, because they
They
were up
were.
in our neighborhood
Okay,
yesterday. Yeah,
great. Okay,
they did a good job. I got some positive feedback on how completely the stuff was actually picked up, even though it had rained.
yeah. And they got the baler out this week too, so
Yeah.
to get it going, so.
Go ahead, Tom.
They went through our street last week. I had gotten mine out into the gutter, and he came along and vacuumed up real nice. But I noticed just along our block, other people had leaves out or partially out. They didn't get it all out, but there were still, piles of leaves in the gutters. And truck just drove by them, it's not enough leaves for me. It just kept on going, and I thought, that's odd, because there's storm sewer right there in the corner, and
Right.
and we're almost like on a little bit of a hill, so just, I don't know why he would do that.
I'm not sure either.
Was this the one, though, that they were supposed to have them up on the boulevard for the
We-
back truck, and then in the street for the second pad?
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
mine was totally in the street, and he
Yeah,
And they took yours,
took it all
okay.
the way.
Yeah.
I guess that's because I'm an older person.
Well, I doubt it, but I wonder about the length of the attachment to, if there's a difference between the street and the curb for the height, no?
No,
Like it couldn't get it all?
Like on a boom,
Okay,
Yeah,
I couldn't tell you whether they picked them up off the street or not. I mean, I can ask the
Yeah.
supervisors tomorrow, but with the vac trucks, we don't like vacuuming off the street because we pick up a lot of debris, which tears up the machines. Because we don't know what's in there. That's why we asked to keep them on the boulevards.
oh, okay. And I thought I was supposed to put it out there, but,
Yeah. No, yeah,
I know with some of the vac trucks too, well, some things can change, like when the truck gets full, they gotta go empty, and we have had a couple breakdowns. So depending on where he was working, I know they've been working through some of them and fixing them, so, we can check with them and see, what had happened in that neighborhood, but it could have been something like that too, but we'll check on it.
so the next go-round, phase 2 is gonna be more of a scooping and,
yeah, with the baler, so that'll
Okay.
actually be in the street and the gutter line, and then
Right.
they'll come through and
Right.
they'll push them all. The baler will pick them up and, yep,
Okay.
yep.
I know,
go ahead.
pardon me for asking this, but I guess why do we start so early every year? I mean, I see the vacuum truck go through my neighborhood and here there's, probably 50 to 75% of the leaves left on there. I mean, isn't there some way in the future we can maybe move this back or up, which way you want to look at it, a couple weeks, so we're not, perhaps we're not spending necessary time and energy on stuff that we don't need to. I mean,
Yeah. I think, in the past, like when I first started, I've been here 6 years now, and really, we just had the one pickup, and it started around the 17th to the 20th of October. There wasn't really any work done before that, and we had a lot of people calling, asking, for things to happen sooner, and but it's the same situation, trying to predict when the leaves are gonna fall and stuff. So a couple of years ago, we went to, with the vac trucks, that they could cruise the city in these different areas and people could rake out, at least to the boulevards and get some of them picked up during that time. But knowing that the majority of these leaves aren't gonna come down till sometime in, early to mid-October. And so that's kind of where we're at right now, with, 2 different sets, a phase 1 and a phase 2, so.
It is a weird balance with when stuff falls, because it always seemed like, at least in those past couple years, when we only had the one pickup, there was complaints coming, like from Riverview and Forest Park, where they had like a lot of wooded areas or, a lot of mature trees in neighborhoods where they would drop real early. And, people were complaining that it was sitting too long, but then in other areas where the trees are, different species or whatever, they were holding leaves forever, and so they'd go through and nothing was even down, and then 2 weeks after they went by, it was just like a windfall, so, and then, of course, there was nowhere to go with it, so you had complaints from both sides, but this year even, I had heard from a couple of people who have trees that normally hold their leaves till the tail end of the season when there's practically snow, and that stuff this year seems to be falling earlier than normal, like crimson maple and stuff that normally hangs on forever is pretty much down in some areas, so I think it just, weird because you're heavily reliant on nature, but I know there was a lot of complaints where some areas, especially over on the northeast side, thought we were always late.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that, we, rather than just like, once we see the leaves coming down and going out, we tried to set the schedule so everybody's aware of when we're gonna be out, and yeah, I would agree that sometimes we're early and the leaves aren't down, and then sometimes we're late, because we're trying to predict when they're gonna come down, but, yeah, from a couple of years ago, because of the complaints that were coming in, we were directed to, to figure out something else to where we could start early, and so this is the plan that we've come up with, so.
it's kind of nice too that if somebody, like, say for the first go-around, they don't have them all out, or they only have partial, or they get missed completely, there is that second opportunity to get the stuff out.
Right.
Knowing that they'll come again, so if you miss your
Yeah.
date, there's not a whole lot of angst between neighbors that couldn't make that first one.
Yeah.
It is a little bit helpful, so.
Yeah.
Okay, and then what else do we have? Oh, look. Snow kickoff and weeds.
Yeah, the snow kickoff, I think went really well. It was handled a little bit differently this year, but I think it was a day of training for the crews and the guys, and and the staff, and so it went very well. And then, you know, the weed notices this year, and they've been pretty steady of over 700. I think this year
Oh.
we'll probably end up over 800. But we are working with the attorney's office, trying to figure out maybe something else that we can do to try to bring those numbers down. It's a lot of staff and administrative time to put those out, follow up with them, work with the contractor to go out and try to get them to mow, and so.
So is the weed notice, is it just noxious weeds or is it also long grass?
Long
Is it-
grass,
It's all the
yes.
same?
Yes,
Okay.
yep.
Yeah, because I've noticed a lot of those going out in my area too, where, you know, properties that are, you know, maybe changed hands or for sale or whatever, and nobody's mowing, and, yeah, more, it seems like more this year. And last winter, it seemed like more sidewalk notices than the year before, so people need to get busy.
Yeah, right?
Okay, anything else on the director report? Those are the only items we have for this month on that. Okay, so we'll set that aside. And then item number 2 is our consent agenda, where we have 3 items. The minutes from the September 9th of 2021 meeting, action on a WPS or public service easement on airport property at Radke Point Park for electric service, and action on a public service WPS easement on city property at 1803 Burrick Avenue for installing a new pole and for burying electrical conductors. Is everybody okay with those on consent? Okay, given that, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda? Motion by Larson, is there a second? Second by Ryan. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed, so the consent agenda is approved. That brings us to item number 3, discussion and possible action on a final resolution to levy special assessments for 2021 street construction project on North Third Avenue from Randolph Street to Boss Creek Drive. And this one's become famous already. I think Alan has this one. Council actually voted a couple weeks ago to delay on these assessments and levy them later once the project was complete, just to have some fairness in the billing, so people's project was done before they were getting the invoices. So you have reports on this at all, Alan?
So Third Avenue was taken off that resolution to levy special assessments. So now this is to bring a resolution forward for Third Avenue to put those assessments on to 2022 instead of paying them at the end of this year.
Right, and it'll be the same bills they were going to get, just delayed until spring, correct?
Correct, and then they'll have till the end of the year to pay them. It's just a year delay since the
Okay.
project is still under construction.
Okay. Does anyone have questions for Alan on this item? I have to say that hearing this happen at the council meeting, a number of the residents on Third Avenue were really happy about this because the project has been beyond a nightmare for them. I mean, they've not been able to park in their yards since April. And so having these billings come out a little later has been helpful for them, and they really appreciated that. So do we have a motion to accept these assessments? Motion by Wadinsky, is there a second? Second by Neal. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries as well. And that brings us to item number 4, which is a presentation on our snow plowing process, and we have Dustin from DPW. And I always think every year, every couple years, it's a good idea for us to have a presentation so that we can understand how they prioritize streets and what order they plow things in, because inevitably every year we get calls. And I think it's helpful when we can explain to citizens that there is actually a method to this madness. And I think if we understand it and we have the map, I think we can help people understand it. So I'll turn it over to Dustin, and he's got a presentation for us.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We put together a little presentation for you to try and go over some of the stuff. If you could go to the next slide, please. As you know, we have some vacancies down at Public Works. Right now, we have a total of 7, 5 on the street side and 2 on our fleet maintenance side, which all affect the plowing. We did have an interview today for a street maintainer, which we got a qualified candidate, so we're in the process of extending an offer, so that's a good thing. And we also had, we had 3 mechanic openings, but we hired a mechanic who started Tuesday, and so he's in the process of training right now, so that is also good. Go to the next slide, please. We do have some more upcoming vacancies. I have a operator who's retiring December 3rd, And also, our fleet manager just turned in his notice and he will be retiring in February. I have another operator who's currently out on FMLA and I don't have a return date, so I don't know if or when he's coming back at this point. And just this week, I had another operator turn in a resignation who's going to a neighboring municipality. So what that does for us is we had 5 plow routes that are currently open. 2 of them are actually a street plow route that has priority routes and stuff like that. We have 2 sidewalk routes that are no one is assigned to, and then also our Route 26 is kind of a miscellaneous route. It picks up some odd streets and some parking lots and different things. And with that resignation from this week, obviously that's going to open up another route, and I won't know exactly which route that is until if like we have an operator that wants to get promoted, take that route, whatever, so it might shift things a little, but we will be down one more route.
Just a quick question, I guess, with that. Knowing that we have so many vacancies, if we come into snow season and, you know, just assuming we have even an average winter, I know that in our brief discussion in the committee based on recruitment and retention, we've talked about the fact that if these open slots continue or persist, that in some of the secondary plow routes and some of the areas where there's not appropriate coverage, is it true that it's possible that some of those neighborhoods could wait a full day or a little more to see that first plow when there's a snow event?
Depending on how many are empty, I mean, I think it would be rare to totally go a whole day without getting there.
Okay.
That is a possibility. You know, if we get 2 or 3 inches of snow, we can keep up with that pretty good. Even being short, we got some good operators that'll normally get through their route in 4 to 6 hours. So, you know, we can make up some of that difference. If we do get a large snow, you know, over 6, 8 inches, something like that, that's really going to delay how
Well,
long we
especially
can
if
get
the crew
there.
runs out of hours. I guess that's my concern, because you can only work them for so long. But, you know, I think it's going to be important for us as alders to manage people's expectations and make sure that on the front end that they understand why this is happening, because there's a lot of neighborhoods that have never dealt with that. They're used to seeing that plow pretty quick after the snow. And if it takes a few extra hours or even a half a day, if people can't get out to get to work or can't get home from work, there's going to be some anxiety about that. So I think it's going to be helpful for us to be good communicators about that. And, you know, even on the front end as an institution, you know, whether it be through our Facebook or through the newsletter, whatever, I think it's important to tell people about the situation we're in, not only because, you know, people may know people who want those jobs that have not found those postings on their own, or they may just, you know, understand it a little more when stuff isn't happening as expected if we communicate well on the front side, rather than wait for those. Usually by the time someone calls their alder, they're already really, really mad. So, you know, and not to say that we don't mind taking those calls, but I think if everyone knows on the front end what to expect, we may have less of that. So, but I think that's key.
Yeah, I think we're going to try and do some on our Facebook post. We'll put some stuff on there, and I have been trying to go to some of the neighborhood group meetings and stuff like that. I've been to a couple of them now, and I want to try and keep going to them, and hopefully I can get some of that information out there to them.
Perfect.
If you can go to the next slide, please. So what is our priority? So our priority is obviously the streets. We have businesses that need to function. People got to get to work. Police and fire need to get around the city. So that's our top priority. That's where we're going to focus first. Get the streets opened up. And then once we have that accomplished, obviously we're going to move into our sidewalks. They're important for anyone who struggles with mobility, doesn't drive, needs to use our buses. So we are going to get there as quick as we can. We need to get that stuff open. But obviously our streets are the top priority. And just, we are going to get everywhere. We're still going to keep plowing everything. We will get there. Some things may take us a little longer, but we are going to get there. If you can go to the next slide, please. This one shows the map that I passed around to all of you. It's broken up by alder districts, so you can kind of see your area. And any of the roads that are highlighted in blue, that's what we consider our priority routes. And there's a couple things that go into the priority routes. One is all of your main thoroughfares, most of the traffic, and as people have mentioned, maybe we need to look at a couple of them. If truck routes have changed, we can look into that. But the priority routes are your main ones. And then also we have, in every residential neighborhood, you'll have certain roads that you wouldn't think are a priority. But our goal is that anyone who lives in Wausau would only have to drive a couple of blocks or so, a few blocks before they could find a road that's plowed to be able to get out and go to work or whatever they got to do. So that's how we break those up, and that's how they're kind of decided how to do that, just so we, like every so many blocks, you'll see another priority street in there.
Within these priorities, are these also the streets primarily that surround our schools? So people can get to and from school?
Yes, schools are all priorities.
Okay.
That's part of our list, yes.
Thanks.
You will notice, like, if you get complaints from residents, and I'll try to get some of this information out as well, if you see secondary routes that have been plowed and there's some priorities that aren't yet, understand that when we're plowing, when we have to get from like one priority to another, we're not going to instruct our drivers to pick up their blades and just drive over there. For efficiency, they're going to plow. So you may run into, if you have someone wondering, why is the secondary one plowed and my priority isn't yet? Obviously, as they're driving around, moving from one priority to another, they're going to keep their blade down. They're going to keep going just to be efficient. So you may see that occasionally. Next slide, please.
Go ahead, Lou.
I have a question and a peeve of sorts that I've talked to Eric about in the past. And that is, the section of Sherman Street where I live off of, on 21st Place, I call it the forgotten neighborhood. We have gone as much as a day and a half to 2 days without being plowed in the past, where I see everything from 17th Avenue East is clear. And what this is, why I stress this, because Sherman Street from 17th Avenue East, you're only pushing 2 lanes of snow, a lane each side of the street, you know, for people to get out. Whereas where I live, I've lived there for 20 years, and you're pushing 2 lanes of snow into a street where we need to get out on a 4-lane street, and yet we're waiting 2 days, day and a half, 2 days to get plowed out, where I think, you know, that should be as a priority, if not more, than it's only a little 4 or 5 block area, but it's hazardous for us to get in and out because we got to get over 2 lanes of traffic. You know what I'm saying? I call it the forgotten neighborhood, and I certainly would like to see more priority. I mean, 22nd Avenue, you know, going down to Corporate Cove is always plowed, Rosecrans is always plowed, but those 5 little side streets are left forever, and I would like to see that changed.
Okay. I can definitely review that with my supervisors and see.
If not, nothing else,
monitor
for
it and-
safety reasons, for
Yeah.
people getting in and out of the Sherman Street, because it's crazy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can definitely look at that.
I think one of the challenges, because we get, you know, complaints on this every year, you know, and you look at, it's like 4 or 5 little blocks, you know, in that few block stretch, but then we have 4 or 5 blocks in many other areas of the city too, where we get the complaints. Yep.
How many times.
So, you know, so as long, you know, like Dustin said, you know, we try to make it sure that everybody has, you know, no more than maybe 2
But like I
blocks to
said,
get
this
there.
is a safety issue. When you got snow piled in the streets and you need to get out onto a 4-lane street, you know, and you got to bust through snow to get to it, you know, it's not safe, you know, because if you gotta back up to bust through snow, and then all of a sudden there's a car coming 2 cars coming at you from each lane, it's just not safe. And I would certainly like to see this a little bit more prioritized. Thank you.
If you could go to the next slide, please. As Eric mentioned, we had our winter kickoff. This year, we took the morning and used that for several different classes. We went over things like pre-trip inspections, winter driving, going over route priorities, and then some operational classes on loader and the salt trucks. Give people a chance to drive them around the cones and practice, you know, what it would feel like to get close to the curb without hitting it, that kind of stuff, and just kind of getting everyone thinking about winter stuff again and what stuff they need to be looking at in their equipment. After lunch, we went out and we had all of our operators go through whatever piece of equipment they were going to be assigned this year. For one, to get familiar with it, get used to, you know, some of them got a new piece of equipment or changed, you know, routes to a different piece of equipment. So get used to it, look it over, and then start looking at any possible problems they'd find. So make sure everything's functioning, looking over things like hydraulic hoses, finding any wear spots, stuff like that. Obviously, being short-handed, the less downtime we have with our equipment is just going to help us. So trying to get a head start on that and get our list together and get them into maintenance so they can get that stuff taken care of and fixed. Next slide, please.
How many routes are there?
28. Did I say? Yes, 28. Then after that, in the afternoon, we had guys go over routes. Couple things we do there. One is any guys that have a new route or are new to the city, we have the guys that have run that route before, work with them and walk them through, okay, this is how we plow this route, this is how we handle this area. Watch out for these areas. You know, we have areas where railroad tracks run across the road, and believe it or not, if you have that blade at the right angle, you'll catch that and damage the plow, damage the road. So they walk them through that, and then it also gives them a chance to go through their whole route and look for possible hazards. So if you got a high manhole, something like that to look out for, and then they bring lists back, and then we get it on our street repair list and send crews out there to get the patch truck or whatever we got to do, get stuff corrected so that we're not wrecking our equipment while we're out there plowing. And then the biggest strategic plan this year has been trying to figure out how we're going to cover the priority routes. Because when you have street routes that are open, we don't have anyone assigned to it. Obviously, we don't want the driver assigned to their route to spend their whole time, do all their priorities, and then go to the next neighborhood and work on priorities. So we're working on trying to split those routes that are unassigned up and add streets to all the surrounding drivers and come up with a plan to try and get that stuff covered more efficiently so that one area isn't waiting 3 or 4 hours before they get any plow work. We want to cover the whole city's priorities as a whole.
Well, and I think it's important also for us to, when we are trying to manage people's expectations, in a perfect world, we divide it up and we give each driver a little more. But that working is highly also dependent on the fact that nobody's on vacation, nobody's sick, nobody's in quarantine. You know, there's a half a dozen things that could happen that could, you know, throw a wrench into that whole thing. So, yeah, I certainly admire your efforts, but I'm going to be realistic with people about what to expect because this year I think is going to be different than what they knew. So,
And it's going to be a learning experience for us, obviously. You know, when you're used to having your routes full, now we got to figure out how do we cover this stuff. We're going to do something one plow route and we might find, hey, that didn't work well. Let's try this time. And as we get new people coming in, it's going to take them a little while to get up to speed. And once again, I said, you know, on a light plow or a light snow plow fall, we're probably not going to have as big an issue. You know, we got enough senior guys that they're going to pound their road out quick and be able to help cover us. But when we get those bigger snows, just let people know, have patience with us. We're going to get there. We will get it plowed. We won't quit until it's done. But just be patient with us. It'll get done. Does anyone have any other questions for me?
anybody have questions for Dustin? I will say just one thing that I've observed, at least on our plow route up in my area, is that sometimes just to make sure that more streets are passable, our plow driver will do what he calls down and back, where he'll just at least clear the middle. And that sometimes will draw phone calls from people that say, well, he didn't plow all the way to the curb, and, you know, I had to shovel 6 feet out past my approach. Well, no, they don't, but they don't realize that that driver is just trying to get a basic plow, and then will come back to get the edges or the curb lane. And so I think it's important that we understand that that's why they're doing that, that they didn't intentionally miss that curb area. You know, and I didn't understand it myself until I had 3 phone calls, and I had said to the driver, why are all these people calling me? And he said, well, I went through there once just to make sure they could get through. And he said, it's nowhere near done, but there's too much other stuff, we'll come back. And 5 hours later, he was back, and it was clean.
Yep. And you'll see a lot of that also when you get those drawn-out snowstorms.
Yes.
You know, we're just trying to keep stuff passable because
Yep.
it doesn't pay to push it all the way to the curb because we're going to have to come back anyway.
Well, and that's what this was.
Yep.
And then once it was finally done, they were able to push all the way back to the curb, and it was fine. But, you know, people were confused, and a couple were pretty upset, and they thought maybe there was a new guy on the route that didn't realize you had to plow to the curb. And so I think just like talking through that with people was helpful, but I didn't understand it myself until he told me, so.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dustin. And we'll hang on to these maps for winter because it helps us know what the priorities are if people do call us, so. All right, item number 5 is our last one, which is discussion of potential locations for a new DPW facility or DPW fleet maintenance shop. And you'll recall that a couple council meetings ago, we had decided to take 1300 Cleveland off the list. And so at that point, I had requested that Eric come over to this committee and have a talk with Barrientos and see at least if we can have an initial presentation on what other locations might look like. I mean, there was a couple on Myron Street that we know we want to continue to look at, but the county also has developed a list of potential sites because they're trying to figure out what to do with their highway shop as well. So I'll turn it over to Eric, and he can kind of walk us through some early ideas.
So there was a list of sites that we sat down with Barrientos and came up with. When the original packet went out, I didn't know if we were gonna have our site selection matrix and stuff completed. So the information that was added, just yesterday probably, was the stuff, but the actual site locations, remain the same. So you will see there are actually 9 sites that we're looking at. They're all over the city, from the west to the east, north, and south. So they vary in size. Some are privately owned, most of them are privately owned, some are within the city limits, some of them are outside the city limits. And they range, from by all of these different criteria. Barrientos went through on the matrix and sort of scored them with what they saw might be. And we haven't sat down with them since the scoring matrix has.
Do we have, so on the map, when we see the radius there, they're all marked by alphabetically by letter. Do we have, because now they're marked candidate site 1, 1B, 2, and 6. Do those correspond to their alphabetical order? Are you looking at, A, B, C, D, E, that type of, or do we have street addresses for what 1, 1B, 2, and 6 are? Because I think it's,
Yeah,
with
it
the
looks
size of
like-
this map, it's not marked well enough for us to tell actually what these streets are.
Yeah, actually, it looks like it is ABC, yeah, that those are the actual locations. Like, so on the
So-
site selection criteria ranking?
Is A 400 Myron Street? I mean, that looks like where you are today, kind of.
Yes,
Okay.
that is. Yep,
That's site number 1.
yes.
Okay,
And then B is over at the current county highway department on West Street.
okay. That's 1B.
Yep.
So taking over their facility, basically, or their site when they move, is that,
Right, yep.
okay?
Pardon me, I have a question.
Go ahead, Lou.
Now, on the West Street, it says it's 16.7 acres. Is that just including the department site, or is that the whole block?
That's the whole block, Lou. Yep,
Okay.
with that manufacturing
Because,
site.
I guess, I kind of suggested this site, and, I know how certain people are about blight, because when I was out there and I heard all the talk about Thomas Street blight, this is probably the most blighted area in the city, and it certainly would do a lot of good to move our department over there and get rid of that blight, because frankly, those buildings that are standing there shouldn't be standing there, so.
The one in between there, is that a warehouse currently? Or what is that brick building that's behind the, because it isn't in good shape by any means. I don't know if anyone's
No,
using it.
there's windows busted out and stuff. I'm surprised
Right.
the city hasn't condemned them already, so, thank you.
I was
Okay.
going to mention, I think that's the same building that Historic Preservation tried to get in the last couple of months, and he would not allow us in. It seemed
Oh, okay.
pretty suspicious about what we were planning to do one way or the other, but,
Okay.
to build all of that, it's already there, but I had heard it was a prior manufacturing.
Oh, okay. So then, site number 2, is that C? On the map, so we've got 1, 1B, and 2.
It says on my computer, B is the current county highway department on West
Right.
Street.
think this is the wrong site criteria. So you're looking at
Okay, let me switch,
towards the back.
let me switch. The back,
There you go.
better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
Nope, that's fine. Okay. Oh, this is much better. I was trying to turn letters into numbers off of the first
Yeah.
packet here, so, okay. So C is Westwood Drive. Is that currently undeveloped land along that 4-lane?
That's correct, yep.
Is it stuff we own?
No, it's privately owned.
Okay,
It's kind of wedged between Westwood Drive and Highway 51.
okay. Okay, and then International Drive out in the business campus?
Yes. And that one is obviously city-owned. Some of these might have some challenges, but
Well, and I think that's what we kind of need to know about any of
Right.
them, is really the makeup of the site, because one thing we don't want to do, business campus land is in short supply, and that is, it has high tax potential for development, and we don't want to take land and make it land that pays no tax in the business campus, because if you would then have a manufacturer that wants to come to town and locate a factory and employ people, and then we're sitting in that parcel that they could have had, that's a terrible outcome for us economically.
I will agree with you.
Yeah, I guess I have concerns about that. You know, if we could create 100 jobs and we can't because we're parking on it, that's no good. So, okay.
Is Stewart Avenue the former Menards property?
It looks further out than that.
Because
that's
Did
on
you look
our-
at the vacant site now? I thought it's pretty much a dead end, and
we did look at that. It was quite small, actually, so it wasn't going to fit.
Well, and I think somebody told me that Menard wants top dollar for that as well. At one point, a state agency had looked at buying that, and there was just no way.
The one out on Stewart Avenue, Deb, that we're looking at is out kind of sort of by 80th Avenue, so it's
Okay.
it's out near the business campus out there.
So that would be also taking away possible taxable land out by the business park.
That's correct, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so then H is County N. Is that up near Greenwood Hills? Maybe it looks like it's out about that far.
It's by Primrose.
Right, yeah,
Yep,
thanks.
so right out, okay. And that's primarily residential in Sculph, other than the golf course.
And you got the hill to go up and down.
Right, that's always a treat for the plow, I'm sure. Z, I is County Z, okay, that's out, are these, well, I guess it is in the city. It looks like it should be, it's borderline on being out in the township, but,
Is that out by Zentera?
I don't know what Zentera is.
That
So-
is by the Olson topsoil site. It's just
Yeah,
east of
it's
Olson.
right out there
Excuse
then.
me, just west of Olson.
Oh, I get it. Just west of X, right?
Correct.
okay. Okay, and then J, County Materials Site, Winton Street, okay. So that site, County Materials, I thought that site was, that there was interest in that site for riverfront housing. You know, and you certainly don't want to take prime riverfront real estate that also generates tax and use it for our purpose.
Correct, yeah.
You know, I think I'd have concerns about, the same concerns I'd have there are the same ones I have with the business campus, that, you know, we don't want to sacrifice growth that will pay property tax for our own use.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
I have many questions. Can I get to them now?
Certainly. Ask
Okay.
away.
First of all, I would like to know why we're even considering Myron Street when, you know, the report, I can't think of the name, the report came back that it was too small. And it says in the packet here, we would have to tear down 4 properties. So are those properties residential?
Yes, they are. One is commercial, the others
Okay, one
are-
would be the Wausau engine, I
That's
take
correct.
it.
Yep.
So 3 would be residential. So I guess what I'm saying is, you know, when we just passed this environmental resolution, this environmental justice resolution, why would we even be considering tearing down people's houses when we have other options to look at, for one? And I guess also, you know, with that, by using that space, we would, you know, and I also read in the packet that, you know, we want to stay away from the flood zone. We want to stay away, I understand there's a river that runs underneath there too, or a creek, that from what I read, and you want to stay away from situations like that. And why would we not want to leave that space for future expansion for the water plant? And why would we want to continue to have industrial trucks running up and down through that neighborhood when we have alternative sites that would, where that wouldn't be a factor? And going on, oh, and first of all, I got ahead of myself. I guess I want to say thank you for getting some transparency on this issue, because I thought as a council or as a committee, we have mostly been left out in the cold on this. And I might be wrong in saying that. When I first looked at this packet and I saw these properties listed without any explanation behind them, it's like, what? And so, okay, getting back, I also talked about the West Street location and blight. That's one thing that, you know, in going through here, that the reports don't give, you know, the little, right underneath the properties. And I think that's important, and an important issue. I would be leaning, after looking at all these, I would be leaning towards the West Street location. Not simply because, you know, we could use some of the buildings that are there possibly. It's centrally located. It's already a truck route. And one other thing I have here.
I don't disagree. I guess I would be interested to know what the possibilities are for acquisition of that building that did not want to work with historic preservation. I mean, if that's even something that could be acquired if we need the entire block.
And one other thing I was to ask is why was Site G blocked out? Is that the 1300 Cleveland
It
Avenue
is.
property?
Yep.
So, oh, and another question is now that we have all these other properties to look at and stuff, the feasibility study that the council had voted to okay, are we not going to do that now? The feasibility study on the Myron Street locations, now that we have these others to look at? Because it seems to me, why would we want to waste $15,000 on a feasibility study when we've got other locations we can look at now?
Well, the feasibility study would be to look at all these sites, to
Okay.
narrow it down, not
Okay,
just one.
okay,
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you for clarifying that.
Yep.
Yeah, it would be good to know the pros and cons of all of these. I mean, economically, we already know the cons of some of them, but logistically as well. I mean, you know, like Lou said, if you're unable to acquire the homes that you would need near Myron Street, say people don't want to sell, people may want to get out of there and maybe don't want to sell, or
So,
will sell you, but.
What is going to be the process in sorting these properties out? I mean, I myself, I would favor the, you know, putting the West Street property as a priority, simply because, you know, its location, it's centrally located. We wouldn't have the wear and tear on the vehicles, on the properties that are on the outskirts of the cities and stuff. It's I don't think you could find a more appropriate location for it. And,
That one and Westwood scored the same. They both seem like
Yep.
they'd be front runners.
but then again, like you said, Madam Chair, Westwood Avenue, we are taking away taxable property.
That is true. That is true.
You know, so, do we need a motion to look at certain properties than others, or what's
I
the
think if-
process we need to do to sort these
I feel
out?
like as a committee, if we want to see the results of that feasibility study, this is certainly an adequate place to bring it. I think once they're done, if they look at the pros and cons of all of them, and then we get that report here, we can then prioritize based on the results. And we already know kind of how they scored, so you kind of know which 2 or 3 we kind of like already. We know which ones we don't like. You know, I think when that feasibility study is done, if that report comes to us, then I think we can.
No,
set
it's not if, it's like when that report comes to
Well,
us, right?
Correct. So that's what I'm saying. If we want to see that report, and our decision today is that we want that report here, then I think we can set some priorities and then offer up some options to the council. Like if you have 2 that are close, obviously the council is going to approve the final decision, the final location, we won't. But we could certainly make a recommendation and narrow down that list from 8 to 2.
Well, then could I make the motion that we see that feasibility study first, those that,
Yeah, I don't think
that
we even need to vote
that-
on that. We can agree
okay,
by
that-
consensus that we want the report here when it's
okay,
done.
because I want to see total, complete transparency,
Yeah.
transparency on this, because this is too important, you know, there's too many dollars involved. It's just too important for the city's future
Mm-hmm.
to not, you know, turn over every stone and look at every avenue we
Well,
have,
and it's
you
like
know?
you say, it's yet another legacy project that's going to last 50 years.
Exactly.
And so we can't afford to get it wrong. And by the same token, it probably represents, you know, somewhere between a $10 and $20 million investment, depending on the size and how much of the facility you have to pick up and move wherever, if you're going to do that. So I think it makes sense that we whittle down the list. And so I think we can agree by consensus. If we want to see that report here and, you know, kind of narrow that down and rule out a few, you know, even economically speaking, we probably could do that pretty easily once we have the results. I don't think we have to vote to do that, though.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure.
I think though, from what I heard just today, like the properties out in the business campus, that are feasible for development, that there's not a.
That's
there's
my
not
concern.
really.
If they're of such a size that they're
Yep.
useful for some other commercial purpose,
Yep,
I think we don't want to step in front of the private sector and make it
Yep.
so they can't use them. Now, there are some properties out there that are oddly shaped, or some of them are, you know, partly wetland, or there's, like what we have for the evidence building for the police.
Yes.
That site was a weird shape, and you couldn't fit a business there, so it made sense to put them there. But if these sites are useful for development, then I would say no. I feel like that's a non-starter for me. But if
Okay.
you know, if there's some caveat and some, you know, oddity about the site that makes it useless for commercial, then maybe. So,
I was going to say, as part of, you know, the existing DPW, and I understand your concerns, Lou, but if with the county property, they have some already existing buildings, you know, for the trucks and for the salt and sand and that they're not going to pick up and take, it's, you know, so it's some of that is already there. That other vacant manufacturing plant is big enough to store quite a bit. I guess I'm just, would like to see what options there are. Now, I understand these other properties, we're talking about, you know, $20, $30 million potentially, because we would have to build a whole new campus. So I guess I would like to see what options there were with Myron Street. And that if there was a few properties that could end up being an extension on the present facilities, could that be done? That's maybe altogether like 3 million versus 20 million or whatever. But I guess I see the building on West Street as well. I happen to have gone down there just recently. I think the street is pretty concrete, that's older concrete and some major cracking in that. So I think whatever we plan to do, if we consider that location as one of the primary, you would have to plan on redoing the street. There is also getting to be more and more residential traffic because of Quick Trip
Yeah.
there that are using that street, but to keep that in mind.
well, and the other thing I think we have to keep in mind with that site is we need to know what the county's timeline is for building their new facility, because first they have to be willing to sell it to us, then they have to complete a project and like get out before we could even have that site. So our needs are certainly mounting, and if whether or not we have time to wait for them and whether or not they're willing to cooperate with us, those are huge questions we have to
They
get
are.
answered.
yep.
So, it's Alder Killian and then the mayor. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a few questions. With the matrix and the kind of deletion of the Cleveland Avenue property, was that precisely 1300 Cleveland, or was that any combination of properties or any other property? Was that just 1300 Cleveland?
No, actually, Barrientos was looking at the larger piece with Colby property as well. So
To the
around
south
it.
of that, Mr. Lindman?
Correct. And maybe even to the west, because I think they had a total of 16 or 18 acres there compared to the 6 that is just the 1300 Cleveland. Yeah.
So has that been pulled completely off beyond the point of no return?
It has, based on the direction from council, yeah. That's why it's been taken off the list, yeah.
So it's been terminated, it's done? Is that we can
Dead-
stick
dead on
we can
arrival.
stick a
Yes.
fork in
Oh,
it? Yes.
Yeah, Tom,
You
there's
want me to
a,
say it a couple more times, or, yeah, it's not on the list, Tom.
Tom,
Okay,
there's a
thank you. My blood pressure just decreased a little bit right there. So.
Tom, there's a worksheet as part of the packet, and it's column G, which is just blank now, so
Completely gone.
Yes.
it's gone.
Okay, well, that's excellent to hear. And then the only other comment or question I had was based on kind of the scoring criteria and metrics. I see there is one that says, fits with neighboring properties and city master plan, but I don't necessarily see any metric or score on how it would perhaps impact surrounding areas and neighborhoods. And Alder Larson had mentioned, about environmental justice factors. And I think, as part of the mix, it might be now relevant and appropriate to add such a scoring factor. And there are some federal level guidance on how to select alternative sites by incorporating environmental justice principles. One's called Technical Guidance for Assessing Environmental Justice and Regulatory Analysis, and the other's called Promising Practices for EJ Methodologies and NEPA Reviews. And they've got kind of a section in each report on how to include kind of assessment criteria based on some EJ principles, so that perhaps neighborhoods or areas that have already been kind of disproportionately impacted by certain things don't take on an additional burden. And I would guess Barrientos probably has dealt with metrics like these before if they've done a lot of work elsewhere. But I would just like to throw that out for the committee's consideration, just to perhaps add one more scoring component on that level.
Sure. I think one positive in all of this is that any new facility, assuming you would pick up and build from scratch, any new facility would be built to current environmental standards, including discharge and spill containment. So, much like moving Wausau Chemical away from the river and building a new facility that's compliant with current standards, which their old one certainly wasn't, we may find, if we were to engage in such a project, that our new facility would be much more environmentally friendly even than what Myron Street is, because it's so old. So, I think that we could find some of those synergies depending on what we do. I mean, we don't know entirely what the environmental condition of West Street is. They may have issues out there too that have been created over time. But I think it's all worth looking at. And so if we have agreed that we want to see that report here, when it's done, that can help us have a little deeper discussion into some of these as far as why we might or might not, love them all. So.
And may I pass this to the chair and Mr.
For sure,
Lindman?
absolutely. Bring it on up. And then, does anyone else have any, Mayor, sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead.
no problem. So I kind of have a wild card maybe to throw in there, just because I'm
We
feeling
love
that
a
way.
good wild card.
Yeah. So, the bad news is it doesn't sound like the county is any closer to identifying their site that they would like to work with their highway department to rebuild. But that maybe also is an opportunity, because there are some things that we do that are the same that they do. So is there an opportunity? I was talking to the county administrator, and he has a site that they were looking at, and he's like, well, what if there were 2 driveways and we just had shared salt storage? Or, I think maybe there's opportunities to work together, although, that poses challenges, but we do have some similar needs, and it might be worth it to just investigate a tiny bit while we're doing this too.
Definitely, especially since our plan includes a truck wash facility, which theirs may not. I mean, some of that stuff could be
Bingo.
shared.
That's exactly what I was asking the county administrator
right, and they
about.
also could benefit from having that type of equipment to remove salt from their vehicles. So I would love to have that discussion, because if there's some way we can collaborate, even if we pick a site that's kind of on the outskirts, that both could operate from and have some synergies but not conflict, that could be good for us.
They did identify a site. I feel like I'm speaking out of turn if I announce it in our meeting, but there is
Okay.
a spot. I can talk to Eric maybe after this and let him know what they were talking about, and maybe it's an opportunity.
Well, true, because if you guys can work on that offline and even get some, like firm intel from them as far as what their plan for West Street is and when, then we know if we have any real options in a reasonable time frame. I mean, we certainly don't want to wait 10 years, and they probably don't either, but if their, willingness to borrow and build on such a large scale is, less aggressive than ours, that may be what happens, so.
I have spoken with Jim Griesbach over at the county about it, trying to push him to give me a timeline. He hasn't given me a timeline yet. I also had talked with him about potentially walking through their facilities to see, what's feasible for us to use and what is just, wouldn't be, And so I think, and then I do know the potential location that they're looking at too. And so we'd have to look at our operations and stuff on that, but I definitely think that is well worth looking into. Absolutely, especially if we can share facilities, would be
Sure.
amazing.
Love that idea. So with that, that was the last item on our agenda, and we have the budget workshop coming up in 5 minutes, but Jim, go ahead, sorry.
Just a quick one on the study we're going to do on this. Will that study include cost information on what it's gonna cost the city extra each year to drive 4 or 5 miles if we put it out in the industrial park for each piece of equipment, and time for that operator to drive that? Will it also include possible losses of tax base if we go into certain areas that are close to residential or possibly business by the river, things like that? I hope that includes that information.
The amount of money that we have, it will not. It won't include, it will include capital costs and estimates.
Well, and I think then we will be left to have our economic development team look at the feasibility of, stepping into a site that they may be able to market for other things. And we'll know, I mean, obviously, if you don't have a project on the horizon, you don't know what your loss would be. But if you have a prime site for a manufacturer and you take it for yourself, we know that that's going to be a non-starter with taxpayers all day long. So maybe we can figure out some of that too, once we see what the 15,000 gets us. And if we decide we want a little deeper dive, we can certainly talk about that too.
Would it be prudent to maybe wait a little bit to see what comes about with the other governmental agency that was mentioned tonight?
Can that happen in parallel? Like you can have these conversations with Griesbach and them while this other thing is going on?
Oh, I think so, yeah, absolutely.
At least
Yeah.
then we get to the end at the same time.
Yeah,
I mean,
hopefully we
like,
do.
when we,
Yeah.
well, when you come back with your study, you'll know more
Yeah.
from them, hopefully, if they have
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
answers to give. I mean, if it needs board approval, maybe they won't know, but whatever
Right.
they can give us, we would take, so.
Thank you.
Anything else for that item? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Neil, is there a second? Second by Ryan. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oh, opposed? No one ever is. We'll stand adjourned, and then the first finance workshop starts here in 3 minutes.